Hi guys, welcome to M&D Made Simple. I'm your host, Coach Alexander. I'm I'm so glad you've joined me today. If you're here for the very first time, please do not hesitate to subscribe to this channel because on a regular basis, I do post updates in relation to monitoring and evaluation. I'm so glad, guys, that you've joined me today because I want to talk about how to build a monitoring and evaluation tool. Now, for those of you who don't know what an M&D tool is, today are going to understand it in greater detail because this is actually what we use in collecting our data. Now, I want to take a different approach because now building a PowerPoint presentation sometimes can be a hectic exercise, but I really wanted to push this content out there. So I thought of doing the whiteboard because it's a little easy. Okay, so for starters, what is an M&D tool? So an M&D tool is an instrument for data collection. So most of you are fully aware that for us to actually do any kind of monitoring, we need data. And it is that data that helps us make informed decisions. So these M&D tools that we have in place could be, for lack of a better term, if you may be familiar with what are known as data collection tools. It's one and the same thing. Data collection tools. So now, how are these tools developed? Okay, it's pretty simple, but one of the things I want to tell you guys that the last thing you can ever do is going on to Google to copy and paste a tool from the internet. So why is this a bad idea? The reason being is that different projects have their own context. So you have to understand that whatever project you're implementing is unique. Of course, projects may be similar, but that doesn't mean they're exactly the same. So the advantages of probably getting a tool from the internet is that for those that are similar to what you're doing, it might help you to benchmark. But the other thing is that, which I would say is a disadvantage, is that because of the different context, they may be similar, but because of the different context, you may be collecting more data than is required, and that can prove very costly. So hence the reason why you need to ensure that whatever tool you develop is for and unique to your project. So let's go straight into business. How is this done? So step number one, the first step before you do any development of a tool is to list all the indicators in the project. That's the very first thing you do. So remember that every project has indicators. And where do you find these indicators? You find them in the logical framework matrix. You may not find them in the log frame because not all organizations use a log frame in their projects. They may use a results framework. They may use logic models and things like that. But the key you need to find are the indicators because that's what's going to help you uh, push the agenda forward. Okay, then step number two. So from those list of indicators, you need to understand which ones are the impact indicators. Isolate impact indicators. Isolate the outcome indicators. And isolate the output indicators. So you may be asking me, why is this important? So this is important because when you develop your data collection tool, you need to understand how often you'll be collecting your data. So the truth of the matter is that this indicator here, I think let me change the color. So the impact indicator really, you must understand that it takes about 3 to 5 years or more to see change. So now, whatever tool you design, it must take that into account, that you won't be collecting this data on a regular basis because it takes time to see change. So normally, for such kind of indicators, when you're doing the evaluation, the consultant is going to undertake an assessment of these high-level indicators. But if as an organization you insist that you want to monitor it, then you might as well do it on an annual basis. But your tool has to specify that we won't be collecting it uh, in this quarter because it's an annual indicator. Now, what about the outcome indicators? It goes the same way. So outcomes usually take 1 to 3 years to see change. But output indicators take within or up to a year. All right, so guys, yeah, this is something very important you need to keep in mind. So now there's another thing you need to also note when coming up with the tools is that you also need from these indicators, you need to isolate which ones are outputting, like which ones are quantitative indicators or qualitative indicators, because it's also going to determine the kind of data collection method you're going to use. So that's step number two. Then step number three, determine determine the data collection method. So for each of those indicators, you need to determine the methods of data collection. So for those of you who've been in this business for a very long time, there are different ways to collect data. You've got surveys, you've got focus group discussions, you've got key informant interviews, and you've also got observation. Okay, I hope I haven't missed anything. Now, before I go any further, guys, I want to just let my fans know. I want to be honest about this. It's nothing to do with the presentation, but for those of who have been writing to me and I haven't been responding to your emails, please forgive me. I do receive a lot of emails, and I assure you I'm going to answer each and every email as the days go by. It's just been a busy period, so I want to ask for your forgiveness, and please keep the fire burning. I'll never give up on you. Okay, so let's go on further. So the surveys, focus group discussions, key informant interviews, observation, and also I don't know whether to say one-on-one interviews, but I don't know if this is correct, because the one-on-one interviews can also be done in the surveys. So what I've noticed, guys, is that the focus group discussion and the key informant interviews and observation, these are usually qualitative data and normally are subjective. But when you talk of the surveys and one-on-one interviews, you find that there could be a mix, but I've seen from my own experience that these two usually focus a lot on the quantitative data. Okay, so that is step 3. You need to determine the data collection method. So in the coaching program, I do teach in detail how this is done. And especially when it comes to step number 4. So step number 4 is to actually design the tool. So the thing is this: when you're designing the tool, of course you can benchmark on the internet. And I want to also mention this to all the viewers, that I was once like that. You know, when I first entered my first job, my very first job, and I was asked to do a data collection tool, you know, I didn't know where to start from. So I had to go on the internet, look for any tool I could find, download it, and copy and paste. But that is not the best way to do it. So you have to design a tool that is aligned to the data collection method. So as you can see, there are those different types of data collection methods. So if you're doing oh, I actually forgot to mention one more thing. It's the questionnaire. Yeah, so the one-on-one interview is actually part of the questionnaire. So you design the questionnaire, and then you also need to include whatever are the indicators that you'll be capturing, taking into account everything that I've talked about: the frequency of data collection, the level of the indicators, including the way you're going to collect this data. So that's all going to come in the design of the tool. So after you've designed the tool, the next step is to pre-test. So pre-testing the tool is basically where you sit down. If you like being alone sometimes, you want to be away from the office, drink a cup of coffee like I do, and order some very nice food somewhere. So you sit alone, you check the tool and see whether this tool has captured all the indicators that you need to be monitoring. That is what you call the pre-test. I know some of you, if we were live right now, you would ask me a question, but I thought it was something else. We'll get to that. But the pre-test is where, before you do anything, you need to check whether the tool is aligned to all the indicators of the project. And step number 6 is to train your staff on how to use tool. Now, I want to also mention something here. Just because you're the M&D officer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be doing the monitoring yourself. I know some organizations are allowing this to happen, but I personally feel that when you have a project that is being funded, that has deliverables, that has targets, you need to have a team. So as an M&D specialist, we are assuming you have a team and you need to train that team on how to use the tool. Why is that important? Because you want everybody to have the same understanding of how things should be done when it comes to data collection, how questions should be asked, what should be collected, what shouldn't be collected at a given point in time. So that training is really important. And don't be afraid to talk to your bosses and say, look, this training is so important. We want to be collecting accurate figures. Please allow us to maybe book a hotel somewhere and do this training. Okay, so please don't fear. Uh, if the funds are available, go ahead with that training. Then step 7 is now what some of you were thinking, pilot testing the tool. So what exactly is pilot testing? So after you've trained your staff, now it's time to go in the field. Now the project may be implemented in different states, okay? But when you're piloting, you don't go to all those states. You just go to one. The reason being is because you're just piloting. So you're not going to all the project sites. No, you're just going to maybe one or two. And the reason is you want to get a feel of how your team is able to capture the information and whether there were any omissions or whether people understood the questions correctly. You just want to test how things are as you do the data collection. So the final step, or maybe the second last step, is to correct the tool based on uh, on the comments. Okay, so this is the issue. So when you go in the field, your staff are going to make comments on the tool, and they don't. If you ask your staff, how was the tool? Was it? And they all say, it was okay. Let's just go and do data collection. Be careful. Make sure you interrogate because sometimes they may just say it's okay, but in actual sense, it's not okay. So you have to really ensure that the tool is okay. So one way to do this is when you are going to test the tool, you should test it yourself. Don't allow the staff to test it alone. You should go with them and test the tool. So correct some of the mistakes that could have been there in the tool, and it's not really mistakes. Maybe it's just the way the questions were phrased. You need to correct those questions. Then the easiest step of all is to launch the tool. Okay. Now, I want to talk about this so that you get to understand. The tool is launched. Okay. So what that means is that after you've made corrections, you don't immediately launch per se, but you should be able to have other stakeholders, or if it's not stakeholders, but people in your organization should comment on the tool. And that is why we say participatory M&E. Okay. And that's one thing I believe in. if you've noticed a lot of times when I talk about this, participatory M&D. So participatory M&D is where you get participation from stakeholders in the planning, implementation, and reporting of M&D. So this is really the principle which I feel all organizations should implement, because really you get a good um, realistic sense of the findings. So when you have these two, please let everybody have a look at it, especially in the organization, especially in the project management team. Okay, so now this was just a short presentation of how to develop a monitoring and evaluation tool. But I would like to mention that in the coaching program, I go much more deeper than this. So in case you want to be coached, please don't hesitate to write to me. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so you know how, okay, so it's actually Coach Alexander 23 at yahoo.com. Okay, so Coach Alexander at yahoo.com. Please write to me. Until we meet again, see you on the other side. Bye.